All right, so I'm going to kick us off. Welcome, everybody. This is the first year experience panel connecting with faculty. You received an invite to this panel probably because you are a first year student in CAS, a first year transfer in CAS, maybe you're an FY 101 student. I know the Mind and Brain Society and some of our other student organizations sent this out. Some of our faculty member panelists sent this out to their classes. So however you found out about this, we're really excited that you could join us tonight. So thank you for making the time for, I think it'll be a really interesting and fun topic, especially so early in the school year. And thank you especially to our faculty panelists who are really the stars of tonight. So I'm Stacey Ulrich. I'm the Director of Student Programs and Leadership in the College of Arts and Sciences. I run our FY 101 program and our FY First Year Experience program. And this is the first time that we've done this panel. We decided to do this fall based on student feedback from last year. Students having a lot of questions in their first semester at BU about the best ways to interact with faculty, the best ways to get involved with research, the best way to use office hours, what even are office hours, how do you navigate this giant Research One university as a first semester student? And I think those questions have become even more complicated given Learn From Anywhere and all the different things you are all navigating as students, whether you are on campus or remote. So we brought together this awesome group of faculty who I'm just personally getting to know some of them, but I can already tell they're going to be great. So I'm going to turn it over to them to just introduce themselves one by one, a little bit about their professional background, personal background, and also to answer one of the questions that one of you submitted in advance, which is what drew you to BU as a researcher and as a teacher. So I'm going to kick it to John first, because he is first on my screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Tully. I am a lecturer in undergraduate neuroscience and biology. I'm originally from New Jersey. I am married and have 2 teenage daughters and live in Maine now. Yes, I do come to campus every day. Let's see, I went to Columbia for undergrad and Mount Sinai School of Medicine for my PhD in neurobiology. I came to BU actually almost close to 20 years ago. I came here to study cell signaling in programmed cell death. So that's fancy terms for cancer biology. And over the years, had always been teaching, but then about 8 years ago, fully transitioned to undergraduate education. And I particularly enjoy teaching the laboratory courses. I've done 4 different varieties of them now. And yeah, so that's I guess that's all.
Great, thank you so much, John. Where in Maine are you commuting from?
I live in York, which is at the very southern coast, just over the border from New Hampshire.
Nice, thank you. Paula, let's hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just glad that I didn't go first. But this time I wouldn't have had to because alphabetically. Anyway, hi everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. I'm Paula Austin. I am assistant professor in history and African American studies. This is only my 2nd year at BU. I kind of feel like I'm here to learn. Like you should have done this last year, would have been helpful for me. I'm just saying, Stacey. So I come from a youth organizing background. I mostly worked in sort of political education organizations and adult literacy organizations. And I went to grad school at North Carolina Central University, which is a HBCU in Durham, North Carolina for a master's, and then the CUNY Graduate Center in New York. I'm originally from Brooklyn. And I got to BU last year from Sacramento, California. I was in Sacramento at California State University for 4 years before I came here.
Thank you so much, Paula. And Paula is my neighbor and did a lecture for us in March, I think right after we went remote, and she's great. So thanks for being here tonight. Abbas, you are up next.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Abbas Atarwala, and I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computer Science here at Boston University. I teach mostly first year and second year computer science classes, and this semester in particular, I'm teaching one of my favorite classes, which happens to be a third year course. So I'm really excited about my third year course that I'm teaching. I've got a son who's 1 year old, and my son and my wife are back home in Canada. So I'm originally from Canada, and so I did my undergraduate from University of Waterloo in computer engineering, and I did then 3 master's degrees at Georgia Tech, at University of Toronto, and at University of Waterloo. And the thing that got me excited about Boston University is when I was here for my interview, I was given the choice to teach mathematics, first year mathematics in the computer science department. And that got me really excited because of the fact that the way the curriculum has been designed and it's very, very applied in nature. And it really got me excited about teaching a class that I really enjoyed in my graduate school. So yeah, so that's a brief 101 about me. Yeah, thank you.
Abbas, thank you very much. And did you mention how long you'd been at BU?
I've been here now for 4.5 years.
Great, thank you. Anna Maria, who has also done a lecture for us on art history and is also great. So let's hear from Anna Maria.
Hi, welcome everybody to BU. My name is Ana Maria Reyes. I'm from Colombia originally, but have lived in the United States for all my higher education, all over the place. I did my PhD at the University of Chicago, but I did my undergraduate at Boston College. So that's one of the reasons I got lured back to
I know we didn't talk about this beforehand. That's rough. That's rough.
Competitors.
That's
Anyways,
right.
I'm very happy at BU. This is a fantastic university, and I just love Boston in general. I have colleagues, and it's like such an epicenter for academia that we have colleagues, in all the universities around. So it's really wonderful. I'm in the Department of the History of Art and Architecture. I focus on Latin American art. I teach Latin American art from pre-Columbian to present. My research ranges to some degree. My first book was on Cold War aesthetics, and now I'm working primarily on symbolic reparations, and I'm working very closely with the Inter-American Commission and some NGOs that accompany victims of human rights, and to deal with effective ways of using symbolic reparations. So, art and law, art and politics, all sorts of fun things. So I think that's it.
Great. That's fascinating work. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Kyle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to BU. I think I'm the new kid on the block. It sounds like. I've only been at BU about a year. I'm also known for making bad 80s and 90s references, especially to pop culture. I am a Bostonian. I've been here for 10 years. Made my way through a few schools doing postdocs. I hail from Southern California. So if there's anybody from SoCal, love to chat. I went to school at Michigan State, really interested in behavioral neuroscience. And it was really mentors like you'll all experience at BU that helped me connect to the work that I did in college. I was a first generation college student. My parents didn't really know much about what higher ed was. And so it was advisors that really connected me with my interests. So I highly encourage you, I know that's the topic of the panel, being approachable, to reach out to faculty as much as possible. I'm a lecturer in the neuroscience program with Dr. Tully, and I teach a large laboratory systems neuroscience in the fall for sophomores. and we work with fruit flies and their brains and study their social behavior. BU, it was one of the schools that I hadn't been to yet in Boston. And it's really been a home for me. I say that honestly. I felt a lot of connection with the students and faculty. So I hope you feel the same way I have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kyle. And Kyle talked about making connections with faculty, using faculty as mentors. I think one way you can start off those relationships is through office hours. And that is a question that came up a lot. So does someone want to take on what are office hours? How do students prepare for office hours? And lastly, in this pandemic moment, how are you holding office hours? Are they virtual or are they in person? How has that changed? So anyone who wants to take on any piece of that.
I can start since I'm fully remote.
Great.
This semester. I live with my mother who is high risk, so I'm fully remote and making the best of it. Last night we had like a speed dating Zoom breakout room thing going on, which was kind of hilarious. So I'm learning how to use technology and to make this the most approachable avenue. My office hours are, of course, all virtual. I'm working on, I have them only by appointment right now. Just because, you know, it's a little more complicated from home to sit and wait around if somebody's going to show up. When you're in your office, you can work and sit in your office and have peace and quiet until a student comes in. But that doesn't work so well in remote with the chaos of home. So professors usually have either mechanisms through which you can book time or email. But I think under these conditions, email, you know, we're now very used to receiving emails. So that's basically it.
Great, thank you. And how do students prepare for office hours? Like why would a student go to office hours? Why is that something that you would recommend they partake in? John.
So, I mean, office hours can take lots of different forms. Sometimes certain students just want to, they need assurance that they're following things. And sometimes it may be they come in and it takes just a few minutes to walk through, say, some new concept we covered or something, and they're reassured and they feel better about it and they're on their way. Other students, sometimes they don't know where to start, which is totally okay. That's a great reason to go to office hours, actually. And maybe my colleagues don't 100% agree with me, but maybe hear me out. So what I try to do when a student comes is first sort of say hello. I mean, most of my courses are relatively small, so I'm lucky in that. I usually have had a little bit of interaction with most of them before they would come to office hours in person. And what I try to do is ask them in terms of how to prepare, have them go back and basically retrace how they were understanding. And sometimes I need to quiz them and try to figure out where the gap was. Like, what did they miss or something like that. And so that's the academic part, right? So that's following in class. How do you fill in a gap? I also occasionally have students who are just, college is stressful. And it's important if you're kind of feeling a little bit not in control or not feeling well or not sleeping or having difficulty keeping up, it's super important to let your professor know. Just so we're aware of it, we get it on our radar screen. And there's an awful lot we can do. I'm not saying, that, okay, all 200 students, please come and I'll give you a bye. It's not so much that. The students that sometimes have a little trouble either adapting to the new environment, especially this year. This is so unusual. We don't have the same outlets we always had before and things because of the restrictions. And so I'm just anticipating that might be another stressor. So it's your office hours have lots of purposes. There's the academic part to follow. There's preparing to figure out where your gaps are, but it also sometimes is just you need to touch base with your professor and say, this is what's going on. I think this is harder than it should be. Can you help me? And sometimes that's a first step to taking a better turn in your college career. I don't know. I'll stop talking.
No, that's great. I think the earlier you can let your faculty know that you're having challenges, whether they're in the classroom or outside the classroom, the better.
Yeah, don't wait till they're insurmountable.
Right.
That is why we're here. You could go home and read it out of a book. There's an awful lot that we bring to it that is really outside the book, that you're going to learn equally from.
We've got some logistic questions about office hours, like if a student has class when you happen to have your office hours scheduled, or if there's some reason they can't go to the time that you have scheduled for office hours, what's the best way to just kind of reach out and set up a meeting? Is that appropriate to do? What are your thoughts about that?
Do you like me to comment on that, Stacey?
That'd be great.
So one of the things I try to do with my students is I tell them that I completely understand that there may be occasions when they're having some other commitment during my office hours. And I just ask them that, look, email me a time that works with you. And what I do is I try to meet them one-on-one on a slightly different day and different time. I've also done office hours occasionally just on the weekends because I happen to be close to the campus. I can just come to my office. Well, I did this over the last few semesters, but for this current semester, I will continue to do them over Zoom. So I do encourage my students that, look, email me, let me know if you cannot come to my office hours and we can talk one-on-one. The other thing that I do is, which John did mention quite well, which is I take my office hours as kind of a dialogue between me and my students. So it gives me an opportunity to know where the gaps are and at least understand how they're approaching a very specific problem. Maybe they may be making wrong assumptions, or they may have a different understanding that just needs to be corrected and tweaked a little bit. And that saves them a lot of time if they were to spend trying to figure those things on their own. So I highly, highly recommend coming to office hours. Yeah.
Thanks, Abbas. Any other thoughts from any of our panelists about office hours before we move on? All right, and my colleague Emily just wrote in the chat, but everyone who's here tonight, feel free to post questions into the chat. I will take them. Some of you pre-submitted questions I'm gonna get to, and at the end we'll leave some time for people to ask questions out loud with your faces showing if you're feeling so brave. So I wanna move on to research. So you all as faculty represent the four kind of big areas in the College of Arts and Sciences: natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, and math and computer science. We have research opportunities in all of those areas. So what's the best way for students to get involved in research? And is it ever too early for students to get involved in research, knowing that these students are our first semester students at BU?
Can I say something about the second part of that question? Mostly because I don't know about the first part of that question. So I got here last year and I had someone who I think was a junior, a rising junior, who is a history major, who emailed me and said that they had gotten some undergraduate research money, which was, you know, I came from a state school with very limited resources for student research. And so I was sort of like, oh, what's this? This sounds nice. What's this all about? I have no idea. So, you know, I hope the rest of you will talk about how you find out about this, because I'm interested to know. But I think as early as you can apply for, if you've got a research topic, you should just go ahead and write up your research proposal and see if you get some funding for it. So I've worked with 2 students now who've gotten undergraduate research funding to do social science projects, and you know, I was sort of impressed at sort of the level of critical thinking and analytical work that went into both of those projects. One student is now going to use some of that data collection for their senior thesis in history. So yeah, there are opportunities. I will, and as early as you want, really, is best, but I don't know where you find them. So someone else can speak.
I can talk a little bit about what Paula is, how to find these research. So the first part of the question is, when is it too soon or too late? I think one of the biggest things of learning in college is time management, right? I think that's an ongoing process that I'm still working on myself. So, you know, one of the things you want to do is make sure that you can handle the load that you have. But one of the undergraduate research projects, and the one I'm familiar with, is called UROP, literally the acronym, Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program. And you can look at, if you just Google Europe MBU, it'll come up and there's opportunities there. And so for the most part, a freshman or somebody who's new may not have a research project, but a lot of the times what you can do is you can approach a professor and find out what they're working on, or if you know that somebody's working on something that's interesting to you, and ask them what their project is. And you can accompany that project, and you can devise with the professor a project suited for you so that you have an end product, right? Whether it's a publication or an exhibition or something that you can actually put on your CV, and then on top of that, you're getting paid to do it. I highly recommend that, because then it's a more close mentorship and you get to learn other dimensions other than just, you know, writing a paper that you would do for a class. So, so there's all sorts of different kinds of projects that professors are working on in their research, and I would capitalize, especially if you're on the earlier side of your career, where you just want to kind of shadow a professor in their career and learn what they're doing. So I highly recommend those grants. And for those of you who have to work, right, to pay expenses, this is a wonderful way of integrating your academics with you know, fulfilling your, you know, financial obligations.
Thank you. That was a great overview of Europe. John.
Yeah, so I'm actually on the faculty advisory committee for Europe. So I'm one of the people that decides who gets funding. And I can't stress enough the breadth of projects. Years ago, you know, say a decade ago, it was thought, and the approach of Europe was only to fund like the, you know, the natural sciences and things like that. And that is, you know, nowhere near the truth these days. Social sciences, art history, computer science, I mean, all of these areas, we actually make an effort to seek those kinds of proposals out because we want to fund them. In other words, sort of sharing the money across the fields, as it were. So looking on that site, the good thing about that is that faculty are asked early on to actually post opportunities there. So it's like a job board, right? So you can get connected with a mentor. And as Dr. Reyes said, you know, you can then approach them and see if you can come up with a project that you're mutually interested in. Sometimes the labs that you might want to seek out are, how do I say this nicely? They're rather advanced, and you may not have the skill sets yet to be ready to enter them. In those cases, sometimes students start out in laboratories, because I'm a laboratory scientist, first volunteering. And, you know, PIs, you know, principal investigators, they're called, the boss of the lab, they welcome it. They love that because it gets you get your hands wet. You do it just a few hours a week, and then you're gaining experience, all that can lead up to making that proposal. And the money's good. It's really pretty decent. There's enough, a little bit of money for the lab, you get a stipend, and they do it 3 times a year. So spring semester, summer if you're here, and fall semester. So it's a wonderful project, wonderful program that typically we see, just for full disclosure, very few first years are funded. Next, fewer are sophomore, and then juniors and seniors are going to make a bulk of the funded projects just because they have a little more experience. And I wouldn't try to seek out a really heavy time commitment of research in your first year. as Stacey mentioned, learning time management, or excuse me, Dr. Reyes mentioned, learning the time management and other things, just getting your feet wet first, take care of that first, and then you'll learn more about what areas interest you and who to approach. Sorry, I'm long-winded. I'll stop talking.
No, that was great. I actually have a follow-up question based on a question in the chat, which is if students can apply for a research opportunity with a mentor that's not in their primary field. So if it's in a student's minor, or if it's not even an official major or minor, is that appropriate to apply for research outside your field? Dr. Reyes loves it. That's a full thumbs up and a clap.
Yeah,
I would say yes, if you don't mind, then also maybe trying to getting recruited into that major, because that's what I would do. I'd be like, if you're going to do this project, why are you not a history major or an Afghan studies minor? That's all I'll say.
But in a way that would be following BU's model of integrating the different disciplines. So I think that if you can actually find a professor in a discipline that you can cross-pollinate with, I think that I don't know, I've never been on the selection committee, but
they love those.
Yeah, I think
cross-disciplinary, they love those. Those are like, they have their own category, honestly. Those are great. We love those intersections, and we try to promote them.
Great. Well, you're hearing from the guy who gives out the money. So keep that in mind, all you students, and take advantage of that. Any other
Does neuroscience fund art historians? That's what I want to know. Can I come to you for the
history
money?
of science? It's a thing. Yeah.
No, of course.
We've funded. I think we funded something like that before. It was oriented to history of science.
Right.
So.
Are there other thoughts about research or other questions from students or thoughts from our panelists before we move on to another topic?
I know that you guys are all first years, but I highly recommend that you do a senior thesis in your undergraduate. I have been mentoring students for their senior honors thesis throughout. So while you're at BU, think about every class that you take, if a professor would be a good match for a senior thesis to develop maybe a paper that you did in their class. It's incredibly rewarding, and you graduate with honors. It's a wonderful thing that you should think about all 4 years, precisely because you wanna get a sense of what professor you'd like to work with closely to develop an idea and ultimately a thesis.
One thing I'll add to that, Dr. Reyes, I'll put it in the chat here, is there's also funding for travel related to writing honors theses. That's on pause right now due to COVID, but since most of you are first years or sophomores, by the time you're doing that, there'll likely be money for you. I think it's up to $1,000 to go do some of that research for your senior's thesis. So definitely something to consider in your later years. I'm getting some more.
Stacey, sorry, just because you reminded me.
Oh, please.
Latin American Studies also has research travel money for undergraduates. And because of COVID, what we ended up doing last year was doing an essay competition. So with no strings attached. And that money could be used for buying books, or I'm not really sure exactly. Something academic related, I believe. You have to submit receipts for that, but you didn't have to travel, obviously, because you couldn't. So anyway, so look at your there are other little pots of money from different programs, and I can speak for the Latin American Studies.
Great, thank you. I'm getting some more questions about research in the chat. I think people are now feeling like they're not going to get funded in their first year, which is, may or may not be true. But is there a way to just volunteer and do research outside of your op? If students approached you and said, can I get involved in your research? Is that something as faculty you would be open to, or does it need to be a little bit more formal?
Maybe I can comment a little bit over there, Stacey. So a couple of years back, I had a student in my linear algebra that was really excited about one topic that I was researching at the time, where I was looking at Twitter data and I was trying to find the sentiment on Twitter for a very certain topic in 2016, 2015 presidential elections. So what happened was when I was talking to him, he wanted to contribute to my research, and in computer science, we have something called a directed study. So what it means is that a student could take an actual class. It's a 400 level class that they could enroll in. And what that class entails is that the student works directly with the instructor, and the student contributes to the research of that instructor, and they get 3 credits. So it does replace one computer. They need to take one less computer science class in their program. So I'm not sure if this is something broad-based where every department in CAS has it, but computer science does have this. So this is a great way to contribute and participate in research and still get some credit that reduces a little bit of their load in their CS class list.
Yeah, boss, that's
Thank
a great thing to bring up, because one pathway to getting into some of the higher caliber laboratories, for example, is you'll first start with that professor the semester before you maybe want to join the lab, and do directed studies. Like we call them in biology, we call them topics, or basically you do readings with the professor and you learn the area. And I think for us it's 2 credits or something like that, but that's something to keep an eye out for. That's a good way to kind of lead your way into getting a foot in the door, as it were, because that professor now knows you've read up in the area, you're getting a little more fluent in the area of research that they do. And it's a nice experience, and it counts, as you said, counts to their major. Typically it can be counted as an elective.
Great, another great resource. I want to move on to just making more relationships with faculty, as this is one of the big topics today. And especially in big classes and in our remote environment, what's the best way to move from just an instructor-student relationship to more of a mentoring relationship? I'm going to kick it to Kyle first, since we haven't heard from him in a moment. Like, what would you suggest to the students in this time?
I was waiting for my obligatory response since I haven't said anything yet. So yeah, just a few notes about research, right? I'm fairly new to BU, not to Boston, but to BU. And what will really take you above the curriculum, going through the motions of taking classes, is this unique experience of research and making real connections with the faculty members that really a wealth of information and people at BU. So definitely take advantage of those opportunities that are just waiting, connections to be had in these office hours. For example, I like speaking about narratives and constructing those and maybe giving some words of wisdom. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for doing research in undergrad and having those close connections with faculty members that really took my training to another level. That wasn't just asking rote questions about, what did you say here in this lecture? Can you tell me this assignment again? It really inspired my curiosity, and faculty nurtured it. And these opportunities are really, waiting for all of you. So getting to Stacey's question, how do you make connections with faculty members? I think, you start by approaching them. I think it's, it might be a daunting thing to grapple with, but you'll be surprised how approachable many faculty members are. One tangible suggestion, right? Many of our faculty are distinguished scientists, artists, and have produced pretty incredible work, whether it's through publications or more formal presentations. Read one of their papers, right? Even if you don't understand the details about the science that they do, that's an excellent starting point to kick off a conversation, right? That starts to make them know that you're at least familiar with something that they've done professionally. And that's at least one concrete example I could propose to break the ice with faculty.
That's great advice. Faculty love generally talking about their research. I'm getting a lot of questions of how students find out what you're researching. My advice would be to just Google your faculty member. They likely have a full bio on the department website with a curriculum vitae. It'll give you, as Kyle mentioned, names of papers. Yeah, if you showed up having read that paper, I have a feeling everyone would be very impressed, and that would lead to a nice conversation. It'd be pretty cool. Any other thoughts about connecting with faculty, connecting with you all during this time, like what you're looking for from your students and what you're hoping they'll do to make relationships with you?
I mean, be social, right? Just go to your department parties. That's, you know, I mean, the reality of the fact is that as much as approachable, and I consider myself very approachable, we're extremely busy. So when we've taken time out to be at a social event, that's the best possible time to approach us, to chat, and to make it informal in that sense. But if you want a more formal approach, in writing intensive classes, which I teach, it's also wonderful to develop ideas. So one of the things that I try to build into my syllabi is the notion that, you know, that papers don't happen the night they're due. that is not, you know, ideas are about, they're recursive between having a budding idea and then developing it with research and developing it in conversation. And I think that one of the best things that you can do in terms of developing ideas is going to the office hours, or in these conditions, just, you know, sending a one or two sentences to your professor saying, I'm thinking about this idea, can I schedule some time to brainstorm with you? And, you know, I teach this constantly, that, you know, intelligence and success isn't a born thing. You know, it has to do with discipline, it has to do with hard work, but it also has a lot to do with being resourceful. And while you're here, we are your resources. So going to office hours with just a budding idea or several different ideas, you may walk out with a huge bibliography and all sorts of ideas in a 10-15 minute meeting, and then you're like well ahead of the game. So time management is very important. And meeting with your professor early on to brainstorm is a wonderful way to get to exchange how you think, how that person thinks, and use us as resources, because like the library, like the computer, we are actually resources, and what we have in our brain, some of it is published, but a lot of it isn't yet. And we're happy to see somebody develop an idea that we know will never publish. So we're happy to do that. So absolutely, I think one of the ways to use office hours is to just brainstorm with your professor and have that be considered one of the sources of your work.
So I want to add too that I also was a first year college student, and I really didn't, I went to a seminar college in New York, and so many of those relationships that you're trying to build when you're at a bigger university were a little bit built in. My classes were very small. I had seemingly mandated meetings with professors as we were working through different course materials. But I think as on the other side, as a professor, I definitely welcome any students, you know, for me, office hours, but also, you know, after class meetings, et cetera, are all kind of problem solving spaces. And I find that I'm often in a position where it isn't necessarily class related information that students are asking me for, but other kinds of things that are about kind of navigating, you know, what folks in higher ed call the hidden curriculum, kind of things that you might not know because, you know, maybe you know, there weren't a lot of folks who had a similar kind of college experience. And so you're kind of like, I don't really know what this culture is about. And so I think, I'm assuming that all of us here welcome those questions and are happy to answer those questions. I think this semester, this year possibly is a particularly weird one. And being social looks very different. And so it is going to take a little bit more energy, I think, on our part as staff and faculty, but also on students' parts to reach out to the people that they want to build relationships with. But, you know, none of this is ideal for any of us. Like, I'm not happy being here on this, like, look, you know, I'd much rather, I sort of build on the energy of the people I'm in the room with. I mean, so having remote class or like halfway remote class, I mean, it's not really working for me in terms of kind of feeding off the energy in the room. And I can't imagine, you know, if I was a student this semester, a first year student, what it would be like. I'm sure. So I think it's going to take a kind of special thing on both our ends to build those relationships that are going to be, you know, long-term and sustainable, because that's what you're doing. You're building a network and a community of friends and mentors that are long-term and sustainable, kind of for the rest of your career in many cases. So yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit for both of us, but the folks here anyway are on board for that. I mean, the last thing I'll say is that, you know, every one of your professors is different. And so part of what you're navigating is figuring out like what works with one and what doesn't work with another one. And you absolutely can't make assumptions that, you know, all of your professors are going to make themselves available to you. But if one doesn't, it doesn't mean the other one won't. You know, students often say to me, well, I didn't email because I didn't think I could. And I'm like, dude, can you can you trust that I'm a separate and individual person that might make some different decisions than the other people you might be having relationships with? So I would just say, like, if you need something, ask for it. It's true you might not get it, but it doesn't mean you won't get it from anybody.
Great advice, Dr. Austin. Thank you. And Dr. Reyes, I'm getting a question in the chat of how do we keep our nerves down when talking to professors? A different title we thought about for tonight was Professors Are People Too. So my suggestion would be to remember they have literally been in your shoes. All of them have been first semester college students or later in their years, transfer students. And they are here because they want to get to know you and they want to teach you. So try to remember that they know where you've been. Yes. And Dr. Austin says deep breaths. Also a great suggestion for most anything right now. I want to ask Abbas a question, which is just about really doing very well academically. So for your students, how would you recommend that they not just, you know, do fine, but really excel in your courses in computer science?
This is a great question, Stacey. So one of the things I've done in the past is I understand that an exam by itself cannot really gauge a student's ability completely. There's so many other components that are taken into account for me to know how well the student is doing in my class. It may just be that they had an off day. It may just be that they were not well during the exam day and they may have done not so good. And one of the things I do is I strongly encourage my students that, look, these occasions do happen. And when they happen, it does not mean it's the end of the world. It does not mean that you would end up getting a really, really bad mark. So what I do with my course syllabus is I give them the option that, look, if you haven't done too well on my first exam, you can, if you were to get at least 70% on your second midterm exam, what I'll do is I'll completely get rid of your first exam mark. And I do it in a way so it encourages students that haven't done too well to work harder and show me that, you know, they've got a better mark on the second exam. But at the same time, I don't want to kind of penalize students that have done too well on the first exam and get an understanding, hey, look, I've done so well. It means that, you know, now I don't have the incentive to work harder on the second exam. So what I do for my students that have done too well is I tell them, look, you just have to get 70%. It still means you need to put a little bit of work in, get it 70%. And you know, your lower of the two exams still gets eliminated. So I try to make sure that you know, try to develop a holistic picture of my students and taking into account the assignments, the quizzes, the exams. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but one of the things I encourage them is that, look, if you come to my office hours, you talk to me, and I can really try to understand what is it that you're struggling with, what is it that you require help with, and I can slow down in my office hours. I can really get to that level where my students feel comfortable and they open up with whatever questions they may have. I think the question by Christina was, oh yeah, I kind of like this question. How do you keep nerves down? You know, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Stacey, too, which is faculties have been students too at some point in time. And I remember when I was a student, I would also be intimidated or sometimes not feel comfortable approaching my instructors. But now that I'm on the other side, I realize that, look, at the end of the day, I want you guys to succeed. And your success is very important. And you know, when you come to our office hours, you need to keep that in mind, that we are all here to help you. And I also like what Paula mentioned, that you know, if you don't get that appropriate response from one instructor, it doesn't mean that you'll be getting that from anybody. So please do take that extra step, and you will be surprised to see that the faculty would also approach halfway to meet you.
Thank you. Also great advice. And I mean, what I'm hearing tonight, if you walk away with nothing else, it's go to those office hours. And if that's not available to you, just reach out to your faculty member and set up a separate meeting. And that should lead you on the course to making these relationships. I want to move to asking everybody 2 questions, and we'll have everyone answer these. And while that's happening, everyone who's listening, I'm going to make at least one person ask a question with their face on. So start thinking about if that can be you. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. This is great practice for those office hours. So my question to everyone is, what's a pet peeve you have that students do, either over email, over Zoom, in person, with homework? Use this moment to let it out so that you can advise these students not to do that. And what's something that you love that students do, that you just walk away and say, oh, that was great, that student's fabulous. So they can do more of that. Whoever wants to take it first. I'll call on Kyle because he looks smiley.
Yes, that was my nickname in school, by the way, Smiley Kylie. I don't know why.
That's so cute.
You know, I think for me, it's attitude. You know, coming with a positive attitude in any communication, whether it's face-to-face or in an email, is essential. And just being respectful. I think, you know, we probably don't have to mention those things, but maybe we do. Addressing your faculty member, your professor, in the way that they feel respected. Probably not saying, starting an email with hi, comma, da 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 da. I think that would probably be my biggest pet peeve, is that level of professionalism that I think is important to communicate with these faculty members that you're interacting with. Again, whether it's in person or in an electronic correspondence. And, you know, I love students that are curious. And so I'm in the business of nurturing curiosity here at BU. And I'm sure I speak for many faculty members that, you know, the cream rises to the top, and we hope we can identify those, you know, next leaders in our world, right? In whatever discipline you go into.
So if I were taking notes on this lecture, it would be curious, write an email with an introduction. So take that away, students. Dr. Reyes, let's hear from you next, please.
My biggest pet peeve is emails and, you know, time or demanding emails with, you know, short notice, right? That's very, very, very difficult for me. And so, yeah, I'm very approachable, but I think that following up on Kyle's concept of respect, I think that that it's respectful to think ahead of time and not ask. Of course, emergencies happen all the time, but the last minute request and with an expectation of an immediate response, especially on the weekends or nights. And so the idea that the professors are people too. I have 3 children and my mom and my husband, and they all need my attention too. And so so it's hard when you think about the volume of students that we're not only teaching in the classroom, but mentoring, you know, in graduate school or undergraduate mentees. And so, so just be respectful, I think, of the fact that we have very complicated schedules. But nonetheless, it is important for you to know that we do this because we take pedagogy very seriously. And we feel very proud of the roles that we have in helping you develop as a human being, right? Not, our roles aren't just to instruct you, but to help you become a more fulfilled human being that is more engaged with society and that, you know, just a greater participant in general. And so I think that what is most fulfilling for me is when the students take that role in the classroom very seriously, when they come prepared, when they're curious, when they're creative, when they challenge things that I say, or, you know, in my case, you know, the images, they interrogate images or texts. So that, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's this, the undergraduate work is mostly about skills. And so to see you develop and rehearse intellectual skills in the classroom has to be, I think, the most fulfilling and exciting thing for professors. Or at least for me, that is the most rewarding.
Fabulous. So don't ask your faculty for things on short notice. Remember, they're generally Monday through Friday. A good 24 hours at least feels a little bit more reasonable, business hours. And be curious in the classroom, be intellectually engaged. Dr. Atarwala, do you have thoughts on this?
So one of my pet peeves would be when students keep their assignments until the very last moment and they start working at the very last day. What kind of saddens me and what kind of makes me a little bit sad is the fact that, you know, I think they're losing out on a very big opportunity where they could have used my TFs or my CA's office hours and really have that enriching process of understanding the assignment well and kind of going through that journey where they can really learn the small little things that will make them better with the other material that will be built on, rather than keeping things at the last moment and just pressing on it and kind of stumbling with later assignments. So one thing I would recommend is, you know, when your instructor gets your assignment out, you know, take that same day and just read through the assignment. Spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just read through the assignment. Even if you don't understand it completely, at least part of your mind is starting to think about the assignment so that it allows you to come up with questions where your mind is not stressed too much. And you can ask these questions on the discussion board or come to the office hours. And you will notice for yourself how well you're able to kind of start a journey from day one of the assignment until the last day, where you're not only able to get it completed, but you're also able to learn the entire process. And I think I really, really want each one of you to kind of try doing that. And yeah, so that probably would be my pet peeve when I see students not doing that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So read those assignments early, realize what questions you have early on, and start marinating on the process. Great advice. I believe we haven't heard from Dr. Tully and Dr. Austin, so whoever wants to take it next.
I have some thoughts. I forget what the question was. Is this just about office hours or just general pet peeves?
General pet peeves, about
peeves?
the classroom, not about, you know, like traffic and.
Yeah. I think, yeah, traffic, well, carbon footprint. I think I want to add some thoughts about email and email etiquette. Don't send me an email without a subject. It goes in my junk folder. Don't send me a very long email, because that just gets flagged and I might get back to it the next day. I get 200 to 300 emails a day. Okay. And I really try to find my students' emails first. My advice to you would be brevity, and put the course number in the subject line. I will find them immediately. You will be amazed by how quickly you hear back from me. If it's something really cryptic or there's no subject, or, you know, I can't spot them. I just get too much email. And then keep it brief. If it has to be more than about 3, 4, 5 sentences, we can't converse via email about it. Let's just set up an appointment and talk it through, because it'll be more time efficient and I can really get to the, you know, I don't want to rewrite the course to you in an email. So I guess that would be a peeve, I suppose. What I love talking to students after class, as long as there's not someone right at the door to try to come in and, you know, with the scheduling, sometimes that happens. And you should understand that too. If you're approaching a professor, don't misinterpret it if they can't talk to you then and there, including out on ComAv or whatever. Sometimes we're into the same schedule you are. I've got to get to another classroom sometimes just as quickly as you do. So if I say to you, listen, can you just shoot me an email to remind me of this? I mean it, really do it, because I can't do anything about it at that moment. And that's just sort of advice about connecting. And finally, I guess I would say something I really enjoy, that, you know, we're all teaching professionals and we take great pride in, you know, the curiosity we can generate. And I like to see new light bulbs go off all the time. And something I really enjoy, and sometimes it happens in office hours, sometimes it's right after lecture, is a student sharing with me a connection that they made maybe during that lecture, or a connection to another course, or I've never thought about them this way and what was different about it for them. That to me gives me insight into how you're learning. And it gives me insight into, you know, we're humans too. It's like the supreme compliment when I make someone make a connection. And it really, really motivates me. When I'm getting that kind of feedback, I'm like, yes, you know, I'll go home and I'll tell my wife, how's lecture? I said, it was awesome. And it could have been just one student who made that connection that made me feel that way. I love that. And if you're hesitant to approach me, that makes me sad. I want you to approach me. I want to hear about these connections. So yeah, I guess that's all I'd say.
Thank you. So brief email with the subject, course number, and he loves hearing about your connections that you're making intellectually. Finally, Dr. Austin.
I don't know that I have anything to add. So I think I said my pet peeve earlier, which is to not assume that I don't, you know, that I can't, that I will respond the same way that other professors will respond. I think this semester, and I guess a little bit last semester, my newest pet peeve, although I feel like I need to figure out what the genealogy of that term is before I keep using it. I am a historian, so those are things I think about. I think it's about distractedness, and this is true in the classroom also. I think because I respond to kind of the energy in the room, I think when I'm easily distracted by other people who are distracted in the space. And now that space is a Zoom space for at least half of my teaching. And so if folks are distracted on Zoom doing other things, it's a lot of work for me to not be noticing, partly because I want to kind of be connected to people, even though we're on this new modality, this different modality than being in person. So I think my pet peeve is the distractedness. And then the thing I love, I think, is engagement. It's kind of what everyone was talking about, preparedness and engagement and curiosity and sort of really being present. I mean, I'm a little bit proprietary about my class time. Like, I'm like, these are my 15 minutes. These are my 75 minutes. And not like all eyes on me, but like we're together for this 15 minutes doing this thing right now. And I get a little bit, you know, proprietary about the time.
Yeah, so especially in the Zoom space, it's so important to not be multitasking and be there and be engaged in class. I want to be aware of our time tonight, and be respectful of everyone's time, our panelists especially. So I'm going to encourage our students now to turn on their cameras. We want to see your faces. Just give us a wave, give each other a wave. I want to thank all of our students for coming tonight, all of our panelists for coming tonight. And as folks are signing off, it's fine if you want to stay on. One of the questions was, how do I make connections with other students? I can keep this space open for you all to talk to one another. Faculty who are able to stay behind, please hang out, but I know you have families and research and all the other things. I'll hang out for a couple of minutes, but as folks are signing off, if there's anyone who feels brave to now ask a question, we will take it live. But feel free if you need to head out. I know Dr. Reyes does. That is also fine. So I'll give a nice pregnant pause for someone to ask a question live. Kimberly, I see you waving. Are you ready to ask a question? She says no.
I'll add something about the Zoom procedure.
Okay.
So I talked about waiting after class to talk to your professor. A lot of students in the spring started doing this with me, which is if they want to talk to me after class and the class is via Zoom, just ask me in the chat, can you hang back for a minute after class, please? And that's actually been really useful. And then you just hang back, other people log off, or, you know, if they're lingering to see what's going to be said, I log them off. And then the other advantage of that is you can turn off the recording. You know, so you really want to have a more private conversation with your professor, it's a great way to do it. But yeah, give them a heads up in the chat, and even like, wait a minute, because sometimes I have to, you know, I can't keep up with the chat all the time. I need a moment to look over at it, but that's a good way to say, hey, can we just chat for a sec when we're done? And just from experience, and I wouldn't have thought of it, but it's worked really well. So I encourage you to do that if you want to talk to your professor after class. That's the way to do it on Zoom.
Great advice. With that, I'm going to stop the recording.
Goodbye. I don't want to just like sign off, but